Good afternoon, YouTubers. Welcome back in to another edition of Astros Recap. David Artis here to break things down for you once again. Been a while. Happy 4th of July, everybody. That is the date, 4:25 p.m. So it's been a while. I believe last time I talked to you was March 26th. We had just gotten news that the season had been shut down. I want to talk about sort of how the roster was looking, new manager Dusty Baker, new GM James Click, coronavirus, how everything was sort of shaping out. There was a lot of unknown when I talked to you because we had no idea when the season would be played. Now we do have news. We have a season schedule has yet to be determined, but looks like we'll be playing 60 games starting July 24th-ish, I believe, something like that. So, in fact, yesterday was the first day of our workouts. They call this now Spring Training 2.0, and that's actually held at everybody's home ballpark. So it's not Florida, Arizona, grapefruit, cactus lead type stuff. It's you're in your home ballpark. So that's kind of how this is shaping up, which is weird because you can't really play, other teams. You can't really have your spring training games, I guess. So it'll be interesting how that sort of works out, but they get 3 weeks, and then hopefully season will be played. The coronavirus has not gone anywhere. It's still here. It's still an issue. It's still a problem. But it's at a point now where we can't, as a country, run scared of this thing. We have to sort of just live with it, try to be smart, especially when you go out in public, wear your masks, wash your hands, sanitize every time you can, be smart, social distance. That's what, life outside and in public is going to be like, and I think we just have to live with that and try to take every precaution necessary without shutting everything down like we did when the coronavirus first hit. We have to live with it. And I don't think this will end until a vaccine is here. I think most people would agree with that. And that could be in 2021. So we're not going to continue to run scared of this. We just have to live with it and be smart. The changes to baseball, obviously a 60-game season. Obviously there'll be no fans, which actually benefits the Astros pretty substantially, considering the fans would have been a big issue with the whole sign stealing, cheating scandal they got caught for back in January. So that benefits the Astros. A few other things I'll talk about that benefits them in a few minutes here, but 60-game season, universal DH, so DH will be both in the American and National League. So there's a lot of changes. If I were to flash back to early April or early May, I can't even remember where this was. Baseball looked like there was no chance because the owner and the players' union couldn't agree. I'm not going to go into every single proposal that was back and forth between the players and the owners, frankly, because I can't even remember, and I just think it's a waste of time. So a deadline passed. The players wanted to get paid for the full season, which wasn't going to happen. I mean, you should get paid for the games you play. That's how this should work. But it was a lot of it came down to money at the end of the day, obviously. So there was a lot of back and forth, and it's kind of felt like 1994 all over again, which I wasn't really around for, but based on what I heard from the insiders, this is kind of what it felt like, and it was a complete disaster, but finally baseball's here. This should sort of go away, all the bad stuff, everything that went, The owners wanted to play less games than the players. The first proposal was about 82 games, but the players were only going to receive, I think, half of their prorated salary. Players weren't interested in that. They wanted to play 114 games, which was sort of implausible. You're looking at May or June to play that much, and they couldn't have this season extend into November. It just wasn't that they couldn't do that, especially when you think about the weather conditions and how things sort of get worse. I mean, in late October, a lot of the northern cities, a lot of those northern cities get real cold, and you're playing cold baseball in the month of mid-late October if your team is advancing that far. But anyway, so 60-game season, that's where we're at. That's what it's going to be. Universal DH, both American National League. They're going to start with your roster usually is 25 man, right? This year, before this coronavirus hit, it was supposed to be 26. You're adding one more. What they're going to do with this coronavirus is you usually have a 40-man roster where you can call people up and down through the minors, AAA, all that good stuff. They're now expanding that to 60, I believe, and they're calling it like a taxi squad type thing. I don't know the exact term. That might be it. But taxi squad, I could be wrong there, so I don't know exactly what they call it, but I think they're extending your 40-man roster to a 60-man, and we'll have usually what was supposed to be a 26-man roster will now be a 30, which after a few weeks will diminish to 28, and then eventually they'll get to 26, but they're adding more obviously because of the coronavirus. If a player tests positive, if they have to stay in quarantine for 2 weeks, and they can't return to the team, wherever they may go, until they test negative for that same coronavirus twice. So those are sort of the rules they're under. But 60 games, schedule has not been released yet. What it's going to look like, though, is you'll play your divisional opponents, each team 10 times. So the A's, Angels, Rangers, Mariners, 10 times, believe, which is an automatic 40 games. And then you're going to play, your interleague play will be against the corresponding divisional opponents. So like the AL West will play the NL West, vice versa, Central and East. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to sort of limit your travel. So you're not traveling into different time zones. You're traveling, the Astros are like Central. Of course, we play in the West along with the Rangers, of course. We're both in the state of Texas. But we travel to, Oakland, Los Angeles. Bring up the others. I mean, you got, who else do you got here? You got Oakland, Seattle, Los Angeles, and then we'll be going, back and forth between Arlington and Houston for a lot of games. And then you'll travel to, San Francisco, Los Angeles to play the Dodgers. We'll play the Diamondbacks. We'll play the Padres. So they're trying to, most of our travel's all going to be off to our west, and they're trying to sort of do that for each team. So with this coronavirus, traveling is a hard thing to do because every state's a little different when it comes to the positivity rate and how bad and the spike. And the second wave has sort of hit Texas pretty bad here. So, but again, like I said earlier, can't run scared from this thing. You just got to... we got to go back to normal. So Texas was actually doing pretty well. We had opened back up a lot of businesses, bars, restaurants, and then we sort of, we started at 25% capacity, went up to 50, 75, and now we've sort of gone back down. We've closed back down bars, restaurants, so we're kind of in a standstill until we can get our rates back down because we did spike there for pretty good while there. So... But anyway, so 60 games, universal DH, limit traveling, so 40 games within the division, and then I don't know how this is sort of going to work. So if you're playing 60 games and you do the quick math, 40 games, and then if they're a 3-game series and interleague play, it's 3, 6, 9, 12 plus 40, that's 52, so you get 8 games left over. I don't know exactly how it works. The series are longer, shorter. But I think you'll have some extra games there at the end, so we'll see how that plays out. And then the playoffs, as far as that goes, one thing I forgot to mention before I actually move on to the playoffs, picture how that's going to look. They're making it to where if you go into extra innings, every inning, half inning, will start with a runner at second base and nobody out. And that runner is whoever made the last out of the previous inning. So... to give you a quick example, I'm sure you can understand that, but let's say Alex Bregman made the final out in the 9th inning. In the 10th inning, he would start as the runner at second base, and then you'd go on with your order, so on and so forth. That rule will be eliminated when postseason play begins. As far as the postseason is concerned, everything's going to stay exactly the same as it has in past years. So you'll have your 2 wildcard teams, your 3 division winners. You'll have that 1-game playoff for the wildcard teams, and then playoffs, the 8 teams, divisional, league championship, World Series, all will stay exactly the same. Something Rob Manfred has say in, well, if there is a spike of cases in one city, state, sort of thing, he can actually move that team to a different location, which would be interesting if that actually does occur. And then they have to stay there until, well, we'll see. It'll be a neutral site, so I don't know exactly where that would take place. But yeah, there are a lot of, one of the proposals or one of the ideas when we were talking about, return to play was everybody playing in Arizona, which would be kind of weird. Obviously, they have all the spring training facilities, got Chase Field with the Diamondbacks, but that was an interesting, like the NBA, for instance, which is scheduled to start a week after baseball. Everybody's playing basically in Orlando or the Disney World, Disneyland. I think it's Kissimmee, which actually used to be the old spring training home, which is right next to Orlando. But everybody's playing in this sort of bubble right there. So baseball is different because we're still going to travel. We're still going to do all this stuff that we usually do. But a 60-game season is just going to feel weird. Me personally, doesn't even feel like it's not even worth it almost to me to play 60 games. When I talked to you on my last podcast, I was hoping about 100 games, and I thought we'd be playing baseball right about now, but that's not the case. A lot of that has to deal with the back and forth between the owners and the players' union, how they couldn't agree. I mean, this back and forth with the proposals went for about a month, I think. And then the deadline passed, and Rob Manfred stepped in and said, all right, this is what we're doing. And safety protocols, of course, a lot of testing will be taking place. I can't really get into the specific details until I actually see this play out. So what I know, the 60 games, universal DH, the extra inning rule, and then playoffs is exactly what we're used to seeing. But this will make baseball sort of, there's no more, every game counts. So managers have to manage a little differently. There's going to be a sense of urgency from day one, opening day. You can't get off to a slow start. You have to hit the gates running. So, a lot of this, and I'll get to sort of my predictions here in a second. I wanted to sort of throw that in there in a segment here. But, yeah, a lot of teams, like the Oakland A's, for a quick example, has always been a second-half team. So if they don't get off to a quick start, which they haven't done in the last 2 years where they've won 97, 98 games and have been good enough playoff teams, they can't. They have to start fast. There's no, getting things going second half of the season. One more thing, the trade deadline. This is sort of spilling out as I think about this more and more, the details of the season. But along with the 60 games, no fans, universal DH, extra inning rule, the trade deadline is now August 31st, which is also very strange because you'll play a month of baseball, 30 or so games, and it's like, all right, usually the usual trade deadline was July 31st. You've played about 60, 70, 80 games, so you sort of know where you stand. I think that's right. No, you've played more like 100 games. Yeah. July 31st, yeah, you've played more than 100 games, so you know whether you're sort of contending or not. 30 games, it's quick, but you have to sort of determine, are you buyers or sellers at the trade deadline? So the Astros probably won't be a participant because, well, frankly, if they're a contender, they have nothing to really trade. There might be a few prospects here and there, but they can't make a big splash deal like they did with Greinke, Verlander, things like that. They can't do that. They don't have the farm system to do it. And I find it very hard to believe they'll be sellers unless they get off to a terrible start. And they're not going to break this team up. I just don't see it. It's too talented, especially when it comes to the lineup. Obviously, the pitching side has some question marks. But to talk about the benefits that the Astros get with this 60-game season, one of those things, we talk about the fans, which obviously It takes a burden off. But Verlander was not going to start opening day. He was not going to be ready. And at the injury, he had surgery when the coronavirus hit, which was smart to do. I mean, if there's anything wrong, get your surgery because you're not playing games. So, but he was probably at the very least going to be out most of the month of April, I would guess, and miss 4 or 5 starts. So he'll be ready to go and healthy. Another thing people forget, Lance McCullers was going to be limited in some capacity because of the Tommy John surgery he had. Usually you look at 190 innings, which that in itself is a huge question mark because Lance McCullers has never surpassed more than 130 innings. He just seems to get hurt every single year. But now you can just let him go because there should be no restriction because you're only playing 60 games. So you're looking at, what, about 10, 12 starts? Something like that? I'm probably off my math, but I mean, he's going to get, they won't get to 100 innings. So Lance McCullers should be good to go, even if they get, into the playoffs and advance pretty far. So I think Verlander, obviously McCullers. Also, Yordan Alvarez was dealing with some issue that was sort of nagging him, and he probably wasn't going to be available if the season started on time. So that's 3 key players, I think, especially with Garrett Cole out of the picture. This is Lance McCullers' time to sort of step up and, well, first of all, complete a full season, but, show us what you got because, you got Verlander, you got Greinke, but McCullers is that third guy. And then, of course, your Urquidy and Josh James is what I'll suspect as your 4th and 5th guys. Spring training hasn't started. They started workouts today. We'll see sort of how things shape up here. But I can't really tell you a whole lot when it comes to roster. I could get to about 20 people, obviously. But nothing's really changed. There's been no huge news. A lot of teams will benefit from the whole injury aspect if you had people dealing with injuries right there at the start of the season, or supposedly what it was supposed to be, the 28th of March, I believe. But a lot of teams, are I think, more benefiting than, obviously, 60 games hurting them. And this gives every team a chance. So teams that, you could pretty much count out at the start of the season are going to have more of a chance now. Like, when I think of the season, of course, Yankees, Astros, Dodgers, Nationals, you could throw in the Twins. I'm trying to think of just the teams. Cubs, Brewers, Cardinals, Braves. All these teams that you would sort of expect to make the playoffs, I think actually are sort of at a disadvantage because all these young teams that weren't going to make the playoffs now in a 60-game sprint have that opportunity. So, but the Astros have been a team that starts fast, so I don't think it'll affect them. Like I said with Oakland, they're in an interesting spot because they're just not a team that starts real fast. So they'll have to definitely have a sense of urgency going into this year right off the bat there. If you get off to a bad 10, 20 game stretch, you're going to be in a deep hole. So no team can really have that sort of bad stretch, especially if you're historically happens early in the season. It's going to really hurt you. So, but anyway, so sort of my predictions. Obviously, we'll start in the AL West, and I'll have the Astros obviously winning that division. I think most would agree. A lot of people are hyped up on the Angels with the addition of Anthony Rendon, Shohei Ohtani to an extent. I'm not a big believer in the Angels. I don't know. I don't think one hitter is going to make that team. Obviously, Ohtani with Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon, yeah, that is a good, middle portion of the lineup. Biggest question with the Angels is the pitching. But with Oakland being a historically second-half team, I do have to knock them down a little bit. So I probably would put the Angels in second place, Oakland at A's third, Rangers fourth, and I'll put, of course, the Mariners. I think we can all agree are going to finish last in the AL West. So that will be my prediction for our division there. Look at the Central. Obviously, I think the Twins are going to win their division. It really is a flip-flop between the Tigers and the Royals for 4th and 5th. So you're left with the White Sox and the Indians filling the 2 and 3 spots. The White Sox are an interesting team that can actually find themselves in the playoff picture. They got a lot of young talent. We'll see sort of how that goes for them. I think the Indians are their window's sort of closed, so it's a tough one. Obviously, I think the Twins will win that division, but I'm going to go with Chicago second, and I think the Indians will finish third. I think the Indians also will probably end up being sellers at the deadline, and they have some definite pieces that can be traded when you think about Carrasco, Lindor, Jose Ramirez. They definitely have some pieces that they can get a pretty big return from and try to build the team back up that way. Of course, they lost Bauer last year. They traded Kluber to the Rangers, but I think the Indians will be sellers probably most likely at the deadline. Could be wrong, but I see them figuring themselves right in the middle of that division with, I'll put the Twins and the White Sox actually ahead of the Indians there. And then I'll have the Royals 4th, and the Tigers are a mess, so they'll be 5th there. And then when I look at the American League East, of course, the Yankees will finish first. I think that's a pretty foregone conclusion. They do deal with injuries. It comes to Judge and Stanton. Obviously, they got Garrett Cole. After Cole, I mean, the rotation's basically just a bunch of people that can pitch well. I mean, you got Tanaka. You got Paxton. Paxton's another injury case. Who else am I forgetting? I haven't even really thought about baseball a whole lot, so. But, after Garrett Cole, you'll have Tanaka and Paxton, and there's a few others, obviously, I'm missing. We'll see. Luis Sessa, Loizaga. I don't know if they're going to be starters or bullpen pieces, but Yankees will finish first, my prediction there. Tampa Bay will be right behind them. I think that'll be actually a close divisional race between them two. I'd probably put Boston third. Fourth will be, obviously 5th will be the Orioles. They're a complete mess. But who am I forgetting? The Blue Jays. That's right. The Blue Jays, they're another interesting team, actually. The Blue Jays are kind of in that White Sox category with a lot of young talent that, in a 60-game season could actually benefit them more. So where I'd throw I'll put the Blue Jays. I'm going to go Blue Jays third, actually. Boston lost Mookie Betts, David Price. They're sort of, I think, at the end. I don't see them competing very much. Of course, lost Alex Cora. I don't even know if they've named another manager yet. I assume they have. It's not coming to mind right now. But I'll go Yankees, Rays, very close, first, second there. Put Toronto third, Boston fourth, and then of course Baltimore fifth. So that sort of wraps up the American League. I think the Rays will have a wild card spot, and then it'll be close, I think. The White Sox could find themselves there along with the Blue Jays. That could be an interesting second spot. With the Angels, I don't see them in the playoffs. So I know some people do, but I'm actually go out sort of on a limb here, and I'll say either the White Sox or the Blue Jays make that second wild card spot, and I'm interested in the White Sox. So that's what I'll do. I'll have the Astros, the Yankees, the Twins, and then I'll have Tampa Bay and Chicago in the 2 wild card spots. So that's sort of my American League predictions. When I shift over to the National League, which will be a little bit harder for me, obviously. But we'll start in the West there. Obviously, the Dodgers will win that division there. I think Arizona, that's another interesting team, will finish second. The addition of Madison Bumgarner, of course. But I think they made some other additions, but I'll put Arizona second there. third. San Diego will probably be sort of fourth. I think San Francisco will be fifth. Who's the other team I'm missing in that division? So I got 4 of the 5, right? Got the Dodgers, got the Diamondbacks, Padres, Giants. The Rockies are the team I'm missing. Colorado, that's an interesting team here. After I go 1-2 with Dodgers, Diamondbacks, third place, trying to think. I know the Padres do have some talent, but I think the Rockies have some talent as well. This is a tough one for me. But I'll go ahead and I don't know. I can't trust the Padres until I see it. So I'll go Rockies third, Padres fourth, Giants fifth, and that'll wrap up that division there. Central, it's a tough one. I mean, 4 of those 5 teams can win. When you think about the Cubs, the Reds, who are sort of in the same sort of scenario. When I talked about the Reds, the Blue Jays and the White Sox, I think the Reds are sort of in that category, much improved. But yeah, you got the Brewers, you got the Cubs, you got the Cardinals, and the Reds. So any 4 of those teams, I probably would go Brewers to win that division. I just think that they're a team that also doesn't necessarily start super hot, but I'm still going to pick them to win that division. And then I'll probably have Cincinnati. I'm intrigued by Cincinnati. I'll have them finishing. Well, it's tough because the Cardinals. That's a tough one for me. Yeah. I'm just going to go Cardinals second, Reds third, and then I'll go Cubs fourth and Pirates, of course. I think all these fifth place finishes, it's a pretty unanimous. I think people would agree with me with all these fifth place finishes. But yeah, so just to recap with the Central there, I'll go Brewers, Cardinals, Reds, Cubs, Pirates. And I think the Cubs sort of might be in the same position as the Indians. Your 2016 World Series matchup, that might be sellers, and of course they have people like Chris Bryant, Javier Baez, Anthony Rizzo, people that they can really get a big return for. It'll be interesting. But I think one of those 2 teams, more likely the Indians, would probably be sellers. Both of them could be at the deadline, so we'll wait and see there. And then we'll move to the East now. Obviously the Nationals, the reigning World Series champions. That division, let's see. That's sort of like the Central because you get the Braves, you get the Nationals, you get the Mets. We can agree Miami's probably going to finish 5th. Probably. I know some people are actually hyped up on Miami having a chance this year with the 60 games, but I will still pick them to finish 5th. This is a tough one because the Braves were a team last year that didn't get off to a necessarily good start. I don't think. But the Nationals, of course, lost Rendon. They paid Strasburg, so I don't think losing Rendon is going to hurt them a ton. I think the Mets will be competitive. I think that's a team to actually watch out for, the Mets. I don't know if I'd pick them to win the division, but certainly a wild card spot there. But that's a tough division because you got the Mets, you got the Nationals, and you got the Braves. You got 3 teams that could potentially be in the playoff picture there. This is a tough one for me. It's a tough one. Really tough. Yeah, I want to say the Braves, but at the same time I don't. And I want to say the Mets. I'm going to put the Mets in second place. Put the Mets in second. You got the Nats and you got the Braves. But the Nationals, again, are a team that doesn't get off to a great start. So it's one of those things. Who's going to start fast and hot? I'll go ahead. No, actually, I'm not going to pick the Nationals. I'm going to pick... the Phillies. Forgot about them. They could also figure themselves in there somehow. But I'm not... I fell for that last year. I'm not going to fall for the Phillies this year. I said the Mets second, right? I'm going to pick the Braves first. and I'll put Washington. A lot of teams do suffer from the sort of World Series hangover, obviously not playing until basically August, close to it. I still think the Nats... Actually, let me move the Mets down to third. All right, so I'll go Braves, I'll go Nationals, I'll go Mets, I'll go Phillies, I'll go Marlins to finish out there. So there you go. Your division winners, I'll have the Dodgers, I'll have the Brewers, and I'll have the Braves winning their divisions. Wild card spots, very interesting here. Arizona intrigues me. Cardinals not so much. Reds, I think, are still a year away, but that's another intriguing team, the Reds there. And then you've got, I think Washington will be a wild card spot, certainly, as the second team there. And it's really, for me, for the second spot, I'm thinking either Arizona or a third team from the East, which would be the Mets. I think they'll be fighting it out, but I got to pick one here, don't I? So we'll go Mets. So I'm going to pick 3 playoff teams from the East. I'll go out on a limb there and say that. So you got, obviously, the Dodgers, the Brewers, the Braves, and I'm going to pick the Nationals and the Mets to win their... the Nationals and the Mets to match up in the wild card game. So those are my predictions. I'm not going to go deeper into, we'll obviously see how things plan out, but I'll remember this podcast particularly because of my predictions there. We'll see. And a lot of this will end up being who can stay the healthiest, because with the coronavirus, that can keep players out 2-3 weeks, and that's half the season almost. So we'll see how things plan out, but I'm up on 32 minutes, so a little bit of a longer podcast, but the reason I took so long to get back is there was no information to give you. I wanted to give you the season that's going to happen, and it just took forever, much longer than we obviously expected, but I'm just glad it's the month of July now. We've waited forever. I've been able to stay a little bit more busy. I got a job at Whole Foods, so I don't know what I'd be doing these days if I didn't find this job, so I'm very grateful for it, obviously. The Astros started back up with the tours two and a half weeks ago, and then they shut right back down just this past week, so I did work 3-4 days, got back in the swing of things a little bit, and then now we shut back down, so that's another waiting game, obviously. The team's working out at Minute Maid Park, so I wouldn't be able to work with them working out anyway. Sort of the way I look at it. But hopefully this is more temporary, 2-3 weeks, and hopefully at least when the season starts, I'll be back at work, and I'll be doing both. I'm not going anywhere when it comes to Whole Foods anytime soon. Although that was a seasonal, temporary position. They took the seasonal part off, so they'll keep me more seasonal, but right now with the coronavirus, they definitely need me and my help. So, but yeah, I work the cashier. I'll bag. GSC is what we call it when you sort of bag, and you do the bagging and you go get carts, and of course we're sanitizing, cleaning carts, doing things like that. We have a sort of a cafe patio area outside that people have to work and spray down the tables and chairs, and a lot more with the coronavirus, trying to disinfect everything we possibly can. So anyway, won't get into that much talk there, but that's just your baseball update. So to wrap things up, just to sort of, right before the season starts, when I have more info about the schedule, more specifically, and just other things, I look at, I'll have my roster predictions then. But we'll be getting excited as the days go by if things continue to plan. Part of me almost feels like this could be delayed or postponed, and that sort of scares me, so I don't want to talk about it. But I've told you what I think about the virus and how I think we should approach things here. But anyway, yeah, I'm coming up here 35 minutes, which is a pretty long podcast if it's just me. Obviously, guests. Can't do guests now because it's just, we're trying to social distance. So, but anyway, I'll wrap things up there. Obviously, follow me on Twitter. That's at David Artis, DavidArtis, the number 7. Comment. I'd like to hear your opinions on your predictions, what you think of mine, what you think about this coronavirus, the season, everything all together. But yeah, I'll wrap things up there. I hate to leave things out. If I finish the podcast and I hit the pause button here, I would hate to remember something. But anyway, if I do, I'll pick that up on the next one. So shouldn't be a while, maybe 2-3 weeks before I get back to you with more information on the schedule, roster, things like that. But no real moves have been made. The biggest offseason splash, of course, was the Mookie Betts David Price trade going to the Dodgers. And I just got breaking news that David Price will not play. Another interesting aspect. When you implement the season, the players have the option of whether they want to play or not. You can't force them to play. And it's the same thing in basketball. So you got a lot of players that are actually opting out. Nobody on the Astros side, so I've heard so far. I know Mike Trout is very skeptical, and his wife is pregnant, and they're having a baby, and August is like when they're supposed to have it, and he obviously can't get the virus, but you're going to be playing at a risk. So we'll wait and see how things sort of shape out here, but I'll have more information on my next podcast, so be looking out for it. Obviously, if you subscribe to this, you can do that at the bottom there. If you subscribe, you'll get my next podcast as soon as it comes out. So, but anyway, love to hear your comments, and I'll respond, obviously, if one warrants a response. But anyway, all that good stuff on Twitter. Of course, YouTube right there. Click that like button, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And I'll talk to you here in a few weeks, and we'll see you then.